plight of Scotland families was largely unknown to most who did not live in Montgomery County until the late 1960s.
Racism, gentrification, and greed became powerful forces of erasure at a time when this African-American community was at a crossroads. But a young Jewish mother learned about the living conditions in this Potomac enclave, and soon an interracial and interfaith effort called Save Our Scotland was born.
And my oldest child was in kindergarten, and she was coming home from school saying things about her classmates, some of her classmates who were Black, using expressions that she never would have heard in our house. I just wanted to see where those kids were coming from to understand.
What Joyce Siegel saw back in 1965 was something she could not believe.
They had a water pump that wasn't working and outhouses, and they were prohibited from digging more wells. They were prohibited from building more outhouses. I just thought, I'm living like a queen, you know, and my daughter's classmates are living without public services.
Fifth-generation Scotland descendant Letitia Gassaway Paul describes the conditions.
My ancestors lived in shacks. And them shacks, they didn't have windows, no electricity, no sewer system, and the county built everywhere around Scotland so that to force them off of that land. How could someone do such a thing to a living being, to a human being?
Scotland families had wondered the same thing for years. Joyce Siegel wanted to learn more, so she visited Scotland and approached the matriarch and prominent community leader, Geneva Mason.
At the time, I said, I'd like to try to help. And she said, well, a lot of people have said they wanted to help, but I'm willing to work with you.
Conditions were dire. They had to work fast. The county was on the verge of condemning the whole community. Families there needed housing, but there was a catch.
Well, you can't get housing until you have pipes and water. And you can't get pipes and water unless you have clear title. And there was no clear title because it's called heir property. It gets passed down from one generation to another, and it ends up like 100 people might own a tenth of an acre, and you need to get all their signatures. And these were divided, these little parcels, and were divided by all the relatives who owned it.
And then you had to find all of these people who were in different places.
All of them. That was the task.
Geneva Mason and Joyce Siegel called a community meeting to get support. Scotland residents came, and interfaith ministers and other leaders came too. They eventually formed a nonprofit called the Scotland Development Corporation, and Letitia's grandfather, Melvin Crawford, would become its president.
He had to convince the community in Scotland that we could do it because they had given up hope.
94-year-old Roosevelt Twyman is Scotland's oldest living resident.
It was a hard job. A lot of people didn't want to take the chance, you know. But then finally we all decided, well, let's go along with it because we can't be no worse off than we are now.
They met monthly at Scotland AME Zion Church, and Save Our Scotland took form, hosting rummage sales, fashion shows, and more to raise money.
This is an urgent invitation to our Montgomery County neighbors. And the dues, I think, were like $5.
Save Our Scotland launched in 1965. The group lobbied local and federal lawmakers to awaken them to the plight of the community and their quest for housing. It caught the attention of America's first Black cabinet member, HUD Secretary Robert Weaver, and ultimately President Lyndon B. Johnson.
We must make sure that every family in America lives in a home of dignity.
In August of 1965, Johnson signed the Housing and Urban Development Act. It expanded funding for federal housing programs. The first loan from the program helped Scotland residents strike a deal. They would allocate 36 acres of their land to create a townhome community with a mix of low-interest mortgages or federally subsidized rent.
April 1967. When that sign went up, it was thrilling because we knew we were going to build the houses. We got the zoning, we had the title, we had everything. This is an example of what people can do together.
On groundbreaking day, April 21st, 1968, Joyce took her kids out of school to witness it. Melvin Crawford helped tear down old houses to make room for 75 homes to rent, and 25 more still owned today by Scotland residents.
He said, "In the work of this corporation, there's no black power or white power, but a universal power of all races and creeds." For me, that's a powerful thing. So this is my grandparents. They were invited to the White House. This is for the work that they did for Save Our Scotland. And this is the picture of my grandparents on the Capitol steps with Mrs. Siegel.
Roosevelt Twyman remembers the day they finally moved into those new homes.
It was just like Christmas. And see those houses coming up.
My grandfather collected furniture from different homes. He asked the community, if you have any furniture, any additional furniture that you care to do away with, please, it'd be a blessing for us because we've never had homes.
Home. There is something about Scotland that beckons those who call it home back home.
Is it delicious?
Letitia and her sisters launched a successful childcare business, helping to shape young lives.
They look like $1 million homes to me in this picture right here. I love it.
But Letitia knew in order to help save Scotland from extinction this time, she needed to be back in the place where it all began, in her grandparents' home, with the light they selected when it was first built. Letitia thought for a moment about letting that go when she started to restore the home, but her mother offered this advice.
As I was like, well, light is old. And she was like, yes, but your light is history. Let your light shine. So it wasn't until that moment that I got it.
And Letitia, like so many in this community, are grateful for Joyce Siegel, who is now 90 and still involved with the families here.
I thank God for Mrs. Siegel stepping in, saying something needs to be done, because I don't know if we would be here right now in this home if she had not stepped in.
A black community once prospered in this area and was almost annihilated by government action, and that it took the efforts of a lot of good people in the community and out of the community to save what was left.
And it's still worth saving, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Scotland's local effort made a huge impact nationally. Joyce went on to become a housing commissioner in Montgomery County, and she continues to serve in the community in various ways at 90 years young.
And yet a reminder that it takes all of us to bring about change.
It takes all of us.
Yeah.
And you know, Joyce shared a story about Melvin Crawford, and he gave a speech after the Scotland community was built. And he talked about how just being able to take a bath for the first time since he had served in the Army as a young man in his 20s was so fueling for him. And sometimes when Joyce would call, his kids would say they couldn't disturb him because he was taking a bath.
That was his time.
But what it reminds us of is that housing and humanity really do go hand in hand.
We heard Letitia say this is home. We finally have a home, which is a distinct
home.
difference. And Les, we also know that a lot of these leaders, they met at the church when you talk about saving Scotland, and that was nearly wiped away in 2019.
That's right. So many people who drive along Seven Locks Road have likely seen this white church along the side of the road. And now you know a little bit more about the history of the families who helped to build it. And tomorrow, you're going to learn why it is so important to preserve it for a second century. The QR code you see right now on our screen will take you to our stories for the past couple of nights, and also how you can support the Scotland community. You'll be able to find that there.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next installment where we go a little deeper into this flood that happened in 2019 and how it nearly destroyed the church. But you know this community would not stand for that.
Of course not.
Absolutely not.
Part
so
3
we'll have
tomorrow.
more of part 3 tomorrow.
All right.